Welcome, everyone. We're live on Facebook. I'm going to welcome Sebastian Schillman, Director of CLES Canada, and he's going to introduce our event for tonight. We're so glad that you're all joining us.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you to the Jewish Public Library. Shalom Aleichem Alamin, in Zait Bagris, bonsoir tout le monde et bienvenue. Welcome all and a good evening. Thank you for joining us from near and far, from everywhere and from nowhere that we find ourselves in these days. It is an extreme delight and pleasure to be with you all here tonight. This event brings together institutions and people that I hold so near and dear. Of course, it's allermeistens, the Jewish Public Library, a place that is very close to my heart, as well as the Yiddish Book Center and CLES Canada, and some very, very near and dear guests as well. So before we watch the film tonight, a documentary about Beyle Gottesman, I'm going to introduce our two main speakers, who are not just good colleagues of mine, but very dear friends. I'd first like to introduce Krista Whitney, who is the director of the Yiddish Book Center's Wexler Oral History Project, which this is quite a mazel tov, has just recently recorded its 1,000th oral history interview. This is an incredible treasure and archive of interviews with people from all over the world, of all different ages and backgrounds, all about Yiddish language and culture. The interviews are in Yiddish and English, and I think there are some interviews even in a few other languages as well. Krista is originally from Northern California and got interested in Yiddish when she completed a degree at Smith College in Comparative Literature. And for the past 10 years, she has been traveling all over the world, recording interviews, making films, and really assembling one of the greatest archives of Yiddish culture we have today. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Krista. It's also a great pleasure to introduce Esther Gottesman, another great colleague and dear friend. Esther Gottesman is Beyle Gottesman's granddaughter, and she is an educator based in Brooklyn, New York. I should say that Krista's coming to us from Massachusetts, and Esther's coming to us from Brooklyn, New York. And Esther is a wonderful educator in New York, as well as a singer of Yiddish song. And she comes from an illustrious family of Yiddish speakers and scholars. Her father, Itzik Gottesman, is a Yiddish folklorist and scholar, and her mother, Emily Sokolov, is a folklorist of Mexican folklore and a visual artist. And it's so wonderful to have you with us tonight, Esther.
Thank you.
So I'm going to turn it over to Krista, who will introduce tonight's film. Shenem Dank.
Thanks, Seb. Shalom Aleichem Alamin. Hi, everyone. It's so great to see so many familiar faces here on Zoom and maybe others on Facebook. Before I introduce the film, I just want to echo thanks to the Jewish Public Library and Karen for organizing this event, and to the co-sponsors for their support. The JPL has a special place in my heart. It's one of the first institutions that I got to know in my early years at the Yiddish Book Center, and a place and community I visited many times over the years. And this is actually not the first film screening I've done at the JPL, though it is the first virtual one. And as the person who's often kind of asked to troubleshoot tech, I'm just, glad that that's not my job tonight. Um, but I'm sure it's all going to go well. So I met Beyle Schechter-Gottesman just once in 2012 at the end of her life at a place called Yiddishbach, which is, if people are not familiar with it, a 1-week intergenerational summer camp where you can only speak Yiddish. I was really relatively new to the Yiddish speaking world, so I didn't know that much about Beyle's backstory, but I had that, chutzpah of the newcomer. So I asked Beyle if she would sit down and do an oral history for the project, and she did. And I was immediately impressed with her just matter-of-factness and openness, the way that she talked about her life, just laid it all out there for me with such generosity and knowledge. So you'll see some of that 2012 interview in the documentary tonight. All of the documentaries we've created at the Yiddish Book Center have been based on these oral histories that we've done. So just to say a little bit more about it, the Yiddish Book Center's Wexler Oral History Project is a growing collection of video oral history interviews about many aspects of Yiddish language and culture. It's a special honor to have several people here who've been involved in the project. Some of you I've gotten to sit in front of the camera, so thank you. The project only exists because of people like you and your generosity. And as Seb mentioned, since 2010, we've interviewed over 1,000 people on 5 continents as part of our work. While our main mission is to create an archival collection, we started creating short films several years ago as a way to expand on the stories we'd collected. So Beyle, the artist and her legacy, the film we're going to see tonight, is our most recent film as part of that series. And I also just want to say a special thanks to the co-director and editor of the film, Liz Walber. I think you'll see, a lot of creative and technical talent that was brought to the film, and that's all Liz's work. So back to tonight's film, just some basics about Beyle Schechter-Gottesman. She was born in Vienna in 1920 and grew up in Czernowitz as part of a family of Yiddish culture makers and activists. After surviving World War II, she eventually settled in the Bronx, where she and other families created an intentional neighborhood of several families that were raising their children in Yiddish. As you'll see in the film, Beyle was not only a Yiddish poet, she was also a visual artist and a songwriter, and she was recognized officially for her contributions to American culture by the National Endowment of the Arts as a National Heritage Fellow in 2005. So I'll stop there and let Beyle and her family and mentees take the story from there in the film itself. But a großen Dank. Thank you all for being here and looking forward to discussing after.
She loved anything Yiddish and she wanted to talk about it, and she was sort of overflowing with things to share. And I think she felt deeply the need to share those things. She was an artist in all ways, and I think connecting with other artists and sharing her mission and spreading Yiddish. I think that was her life force.
Der Zimmertog hinge, Blätter vergeilte liegen auf dem Droh. In die Rajoines alleine, sie gehen zurück, Zimmer, Rose immer, Blut über Berglach.
Beyle Schachter Gottesmann ist gewesen ein Dichter, ein Maler, Pädagog. Sie hat geschrieben Lieder, sei für Kinder, sei für Erwachsene, ungeschrieben Theaterpieces. Sie hat gehabt als auch verschiedene Talenten. Sie ist gewesen eine Künstlerin, aber nicht nur. Sie hat euch erzeugen und weitergegeben die Sprache. Sie ist auch gewesen eine Jiddischistke. Ich meine, sie hat bekommen einen National Heritage Award. Das ist die höchste Auszeichnung für so gerufene traditionelle Kunst.
Und lassen wir hoffen, dass es wird weitergehen, also in der Sprache, in der Kultur, mit aushalten. Schon 1000 Jahre lebt es in einem Land, in einer Tat und einer Mama mit Erfolg. Wir haben lieb Jiddisch und es ist unsere Mama los. Und einfach viele nicht unsere Mama los, in der zweiten Sprache. Aber ich verstehe, also, ihr kennt dafür nicht von daheim. Aber ihr kennt das sie. Und wenn wir hoffen, dass es wird weiter so geht.
Ich bin geboren in Wien, Österreich, in 1920. Dort hat meine Tante Mama Chassene gehabt und dort bin ich geboren.
Die Mama ist geboren in Wien, aber aufgewachsen in Czernowitz, was ist die Kronstadt von Bukowina.
Es ist eine sehr schöne Stadt und mit sehr Menschen, die haben sehr gegräßt, sie sind sehr bewusstsinnig, sie haben gelernt, sie haben diskutiert Politik, es gibt Parteien verschiedene. Es ist sehr lebendige, eine kulturelle Stadt.
Euch sein in Czernowitz und sehen meine Mamas Gas und wie das Geschäft ist gewesen. Czernowitz ist noch halt sehr eine schöne Stadt. Es ist nicht bombardiert geworden und es ist geblieben, wie es ist gewesen.
Mein Tag ist ein größer Jiddisch, ist mit noch gerät Jiddisch. Nicht, wir haben gekannt, die anderen Sprachen, versteht sich. Es gewesen Deutsch, Ukrainisch, in der Schule hat man gelernt Rumänisch und Lateinisch und Französisch. Wir haben geschwimmene Sprachen, aber wir haben gerät Jiddisch.
Ihre Sprache, kann man sagen, ist gewesen eine jiddischistische. Jetzt hat der Marshall, also er sucht die Sprache, ist gegangen zu Fuß auf der Czernowitzer Konferenz. Also meine Sache ist für mich interessant, der Marshall zu geben, okay, das ist MSC nicht, das ist nicht wichtig, aber was meine Bedeutung hat das? Was meint das, was mein Symbol ist das? Sie definiert sich mit dem. Also das ist also wichtig für die Sprache, was der Tater hat getan zu, ich weiß, 17, 18 Jahren. Und das ist ein Symbol von sein übergegeben. Also übergegeben für Jiddisch, also man wird gegangen, etwas, ich weiß, 900 Kilometer. Und das ist für mich also meine grundlegende Sache für Jiddischismus.
Ich weiß, ja, Jiddischismus meint für Menschen eine neue Welt, ein neuer Aspekt. Für mich ist Jiddischismus ein Lebensstege. Ich bin eine Tochter von einer heiße Jiddisch und also bin ich, also wie gehe noch.
Mein Baba, Lifsche, ich bin ein außergewöhnlicher Singer.
Everyone sort of talked about Lifsha like she was the best of us. And her voice was like very beautiful. And in our family, sort of, she's discussed as being sort of this beautiful songbird who really got it. And everyone else has sort of been approximating that ever since.
Professor Kirschenblatt hat sie interviewt und hat ausgefunden, dass sie über 100 Lieder gekannt. Volkslieder, Theaterlieder, was für ein Lied auf der Welt hat sie gekannt. Käme nicht mit den Papierlern, wie man kiegt hinterher, käme alles aus dem Wenig. Bahar kennt Lieder gesungen und wir haben alle mitgesungen, die ganze Stil.
Die Menschen haben lieb gehabt zu singen und gekannt zu singen. Meine Mama ist ein größer Sänger, noch ganz anders von der Bobbin.
Ich will sagen, ich trage Heim zurück mit Dank für das gute Heim, was hat die Mama uns gegeben. Erstens ist es gewesen Liebschaft und Kreativität. Man hat gesungen.
Bei man Mames Stiebele, Stiebele, bin nach mir gestanden, bin nach mir gestanden.
Ich meine, geschrieben habe ich nicht, aber wir haben eine Sache rezitiert, Poemes von Poeten, jüdische Poeten, Leivik. Wir haben kein Außenwenig. Der Remes ist, ich meine, Poesie ist immer gewesen, beliebt. Ich habe es lieb gehabt. Ich habe gekannt Außenwenig, rumänische Ballades, deutsche, jüdisch. Aber geschrieben habe ich nicht.
Das ist mein Chasne-Bild in Czernowitz, 1941. Meine Mama ist 21 Jahre alt. Und es ist nicht kein freiliche Chasne, weil es in meine Mamas Tate Benjamin hat man schon verschickt, hat es in Twisse und er hat nicht gekannt kommen. Und mein Tate ist ein Doktor. Und das hat sehr ein bisschen geholfen in der Mochume, wo er ist ein Doktor.
Ich bin gefahren von Wien in Czernowitz und dort geblieben. Aber wie gehe ich, und okkupiert von den Russen, das andere Meise, ist, wie gehe ich, wenn die Russen haben gemacht, den Upmach in Jalta, also wenn nach Russland, die Jeden von der Nordbukowina, sind alle weg. Wir sind so gelaufen, nicht einer geblieben in Stutt. Ist gefahren mit Autos, mit Pferden, Wegener, zu Fuß gegangen, mit Bicycle. Wie soll mit noch gekannt, ist man noch weg von dem Gnäden. Man hat gemeint, dass auch Menschen haben gemeint, sie wird sein Gier, sie wird seiner Gnäden. Man hat sich vorgestellt, dass Menschen haben lieb sich holen. Aber ich habe gesagt zu meinen Menschen, ich habe das Gefühl, dass es der letzte Tag vom Frieden, wenn sie nach reinmarschiert. Und so ist es Tag gewesen. Bald noch ein paar Tage hat man ungeheuer inmitten der Nacht gekommen, arrestiert den, arrestiert jenen. Und man hat nicht gewiss, von wo es. Meine Taten haben sie genommen, auch dem. Und wir haben gehabt einen Prozess. Wir haben gehabt gar nichts zu uns da.
Wer durch die Tieren von Ort und von Zeit stehst du vor mir im vernebelter Weid, und von hinter die zusammen verlegte Affier, die schmeichelst an ewigen Schmeichel zu mir, meine chaverte Männchen.
Das Haus haben wir gekauft in 1964. Ich bin in der ersten Klasse. Das sind 3 Sprachen, was haben Bekiven sich herangezogen auf einen Gas, damit die Kinder sollen aufwachsen, redende Jiddisch.
Wenn ich bin gewesen, 6 Jahre alt, habe ich mich herübergezogen in Bronx auf Bainbridge Avenue, wo es die jüdische Welt kennt wie die Bainbridge Ifke. Auf der Gas haben gewohnt 3 Sprachen, die Schächters, die Gottesmanns, was wir sind mit sie. In unser Haus ist gewesen 3 Häuser weg von Sands. In David Fischmanns Haus ist gewesen auf der anderen Seite. Aber es ist gewesen sehr wichtig, was Freitag zu Nacht wir verstanden ist. Das ist nicht nur zu reden Jiddisch, nur zu lernen die jüdische Literatur. Wir sind gewesen sehr nuend, wir 4. Ich ein Gittel in Itzigendorf, weil wir haben Sachen gelacht. Die Kinder, wir haben alle geredet Jiddisch, wir haben alle gespielt in Beyle auf Jiddisch, alles Dinge megatin auf Jiddisch.
It almost seems like some sort of Camelot, or not really, but the way they would talk about it was so idyllic. It seemed amazing, and they had a nature club and a kids journal.
Auf demselben Block ist das Sholem Aleichem Center. Erstens eine Schule, wie unsere Kinder sind gegangen. Haben sie gelernt, Jiddisch lernen, schreiben, Geschichte. Und sie haben gehabt sehr gute Lehrer.
So das sind Fotografien von den amoligen Klassen. Moishe Goldstein, Blume Lederhändler ist unsere Lehrerin, sie ist heint in Jerusalem. Das ist mein Bruder, Chaim. Bei dem hat es euch gesehen, also. Das ist der friedige Binien.
Die Kinder sind gegangen jeden Tag nach der Public School hin und haben sie gelernt jüdische Mode. Gemacht Juntäuben, Feierungen. Die waren sehr gut. In Keller ist eine Biene. Und wir haben Unternehmungen dort. Einmal Filme, jüdische Filme. Und Lektions.
They lived sort of seems parallel lives in English and Yiddish.
Mir, du sagst Jüdisches, sehr heißig sieden von Umgehen in Jiddisch, von Leben in Jiddisch, sich ausleben in Jiddisch. Unsere Kinder, unsere Enkel, unsere ganze Sprache geht auf die Wegen. Aber wahnsinnige Erziehung in Mamschig sein, in der Sprache, in der Kultur. Und es ist unsere Kultur, es ist unsere Welt, eine Welt für sich. Ja, es ist nicht Jewish, es ist Jiddisch.
It's one of those houses that's like more than it's like an idea that's also a house. It was so her, and that was like embroidered pillows and her sculptures and lots of her art and paintings. And there's art everywhere. There is stuff everywhere. There's pottery, her couch, which I like can remember as like a little kid just lying on it. Like it's a very tactile memory. Carpeted stairs. And then there were bedrooms. We still refer to them even now as the bedrooms of the kids who grew up in them, my dad and his siblings. My Bubby and Zadie's big bedroom, and which I remember like the jewelry, like the old, 1950s pins and stuff, always out, and like her powders and all the things that I would play with when I was little. And a lot of time in the living room and the dining room. I mean, the first floor was a very social house. People were over. People would live there for long periods of time. And there was a big house, and her, especially after her husband died and her son died and her daughter died, like there was a lot of space in that house and it was really filled.
Von den ersten Juden ist geworden bekannt, als man kann einstehen, man kann schlafen, und man darf an Ort wie zu schlafen. Sachpoeten sind da gewesen und Schreiber. Sicher gekommen 1 Nacht, 2 Nacht, aber etliche sind gekommen etliche Redaschen.
People would just live there and to be near Yiddish, and she would sing with them, and there were guests, constantly. And she had friends, all over the world, and she was always getting calls from someone who wanted to talk to her. Close friends who were like people who wanted to be near her and study with her, and who she had real affection for.
Hat meine Mama es gerufen Hotel Gottesmann, weil wir haben keinmal genommen kein Geld erwartet.
Was für mir ist gewesen mit zum Wichtigsten, was auf mir hat gemacht, eine sehr große Anspruch sind, die Singereien in ihr Stub. Ich meine, ich habe sich mir ist allemal gewesen interessant Musik. Ich habe sehr stark lieb Lieder und nicht stammjüdische Lieder, aber euch ihre Lieder, aber nicht nur. Ich habe sehr lieb euch die ältere jüdische Lieder, die was Lomoschel, ihr Mames Liefste Schechter Wittmanns Repertoire, die vom 19. Jahrhundert und öfter ein bisschen älter. Die Ballades, und ich habe sehr lieb, wenn man hat sich zu neu geklebt und es ist nicht wie was man kennt auf Englisch, etwas Sing-Along, wo der Ziel ist, man soll finden ein Lied, das jeder einer kennt und man soll es poschet singen in einem, aber es ist eine ganz andere Atmosphäre. Es ist mehr wie ein Ziel wie, öfter ist da etwas, was keiner Lied, was keiner kennt nicht. Es ist öfter für einen Wissenschaftler oder für einen Forscher ist es mehr interessant, ich weiß nicht, aber das habe ich sehr stark lieb gehabt, zu hören, man hört sich zu. Es ist nicht Stammverbringen in einem, man hört sich zu und jedes Lied ist also mein Äußer. Es ist, man hat es nicht gehört, eine lange Zeit.
dann gibt man sie ja Blumenkränzele, und man geht damit Zweitenzele. Die Blumen sind, schmecken fein, wie kann es denn gut sein, als Russenkalle sollen kennen fein. Die Blumenkränzler, nicht lang blieben sei. Die Gäste, eins noch das andere, verfliehen sei.
There would be sort of an occasion, really run the gamut. You would have like a chassid, and you'd also have a group of Germans who were visiting for the week and were like here to study with her. Oh, so the backyard is actually a major feature because that was where our sukkahs always happened when I was a kid, or sikkas. And then there was a little cottage that was like a 1920s painter's house. It had these big windows. She spent a lot of time in the backyard, just sitting there and also drawing and just sort of being there and gardening. Even though mostly that just consisted of like sticking chopsticks in pots that you would overwater. There's a lot of coffee drinking in my family. People are very big on coffee. And so, especially Beyle, like she would drink these little airline cups of, like, they don't give them anymore, but they used to give you these little dinky plastic cups, and she'd have like 13 cups of coffee a day. She and my dad being in the backyard drinking coffee, or whoever else was there being in the backyard drinking coffee. Nature plus coffee, sort of slightly overgrown. And the stray cats, like it was a very sort of collision between the Bronx and nature. She did like love nature and love being in the garden. I mean, the backyard was a sort of very clear hearth. There was like famous neighbors and famous stories about this one time. But yeah, it was like it was a house very full of the people who lived in it, to the brim.
Was straks de weg de hand dat ik het zin heb.
Es ist danken Gott, wir sind draußen. Maar toch eerst, is met de van merken, wo sind wir da? Was lacht ihr? Ich bleib nachher zu
If I think of as sort of throughout time, I think about her skin is the first thing I think about, sort of papery and soft. I can see the colors and the textures in my head and her warmth. And she had hair that was brown and then sort of turned more gray, and a very warm, round face. Her eyes were very open and curious and assessing. She was quick to laugh and also like kind of smirk. And sometimes she looked quite sad.
In dem Zimmer, in unser Esszimmer, trifft man sich schon 25 Jahre, jeden Montag, via ein Schmueskreis. Die Mama hat das angeheuben. Zuerst ist es vorgekommen in Sholem Aleichem Center, aber nach ein paar Jahren sind sie gekommen nachher, es gewesen mehr heimisch. Und eine Sache von den Menschen sind noch von den ersten Jahren. Aber man hat auch gesungen und einmal, ich denke, man hat gelernt einmal in die friedlichen Jahren. Aber direkt ist gewesen zu reden, weil keiner hat nicht keine Gelegenheit. Und es ist eine Gelegenheit, wir reden auch Jiddisch. Und die Mama ist gewesen sehr streng wegen dem. Und als wir zu allem hatten gesucht in ein Wörterbuch, als man gedacht ein Wort. Und es geht weiter, nachdem wie sie ist gestorben.
Ich bin zufrieden, was Ethik hat schon im Fall ihr heute gehabt, den Gedanken, als man wollte gedacht machen, etwas am Jiddisch Haus von dem. Was das Menschen wohnen in einem. Und man will, dass dort wohnen Menschen, was reden Jiddisch. Also als Jiddisch bleibt in dem Haus, mehr weniger. Und wenn ich bin gewesen in 2014, ich meine, als wir haben dort auch gehabt, dass mein Beyle, Lesikoren Beyle Lehnkreis ist, ich weiß nicht, wie es ist, aber ich auch nicht, es ist gewesen klar Beyles Stub. Und man will nicht nur reden Jiddisch, aber auch ein bisschen reden wegen ihr und bekennen Menschen mit ihrer Poesie, mit ihren Liedern. Einmal hat man Poschet sich getroffen, ich weiß, in einer Sofwoch oder etwas Jontef und gesungen Lieder und euch aber da reingenommen ihre Lieder.
Weil ich hab keinmal in der Finsternis geblandet, beim mein kerzenschmächeligen Leben. Sie lachte mir das Herz, wenn ihr der Mann seht, als ich trug an Nomen noch a Reben.
Meine Mama hat heute im Kohl lechatchille gewollt sein Künstlerin, am Malerin. Und sie hat von den jüngsten Jahren gezeichnet und gemalt. 3-mal hat sie studiert Kunst. Zuerst in Wien, wenn 16 Jahre alt ist sie gefahren in Wien zu Kräuven. Von Czernowitz noch einmal gekommen sind sie gekommen in Bukarest und dort studiert. Und von Bukarest sind sie in ein schweres Plätelager in Wien, das war 1947 bis 1951. Und sie hat dort noch weiter sich gelernt, Kunst, allemal gezeichnet. Sie ist bei mir eine Meisterin von einer gierige Zeichnung. Auf Englisch wird man gesagt, ein Sketch, sehr gierig gemacht. Aber ich habe es gehabt, dem Tamzes von der Szene.
She had like 20 sketch pads with her wherever she went. Back of napkins and stained receipts. He would just turn over sort of any surface in her house and there would be like 25 drawings of many different things, but it was always sort of around her.
Und in den letzten Jahren sieht man in ihrer Bücherpoesie hat man gewollt zu neu bringen, sei Lieder, sei Zeichnungen. In den 60er Jahren hat sich ihr verbängt noch ihre Babys. Hat sie angegeben wollen, wie sie hat gedenkt, ihr Babetobe mit die weiße Tierchlach. Aber danach hat sie euch Sachbilder versteht sich von der Sprache von meiner Schwester und von mir. Das ist meine Schwester Tabele. Und sie hat ein Lied wegen dem, was in eins von den Büchern nicht verändigte Porträt wegen meiner Schwester Tabele. Und wie ihr seht, sie hat sehr lieb gehabt zum Blumen, Laukes und Blumen und Porträten. Das ist wenn es ihre Hauptthemas.
Shasha, wieder gele Blimelach und Grusen. Jo, jo, ich mache weg dich Maris mit der Hand. Jo, jo, es klurt sich wieder auf der Haare.
Mein Mann ist gewesen ein Doktor, weg von der Stieb, eine Sachschule. Und wir sind gewesen allein mit 3 Kindern. Ist gewesen ein bisschen unmütig. Erst für meine Kinder. Für meine Kinder, wenn sie sind geboren, für sie habe ich umgeschrieben, sie zu verweilen.
Sie gewesen eine Lehrerin in die Arbeiteringsschulen, Schomalechem-Schulen, geschrieben musikalische Pieces, 5 oder 6. Und sie ist nicht keine Musikerin, sie hat das reingesungen, sie singt es rein in einer Kassette und danach wird aneinander Musiker soll es verschreiben.
Zu machen Atmosphäre, schöne, freiliche, für die Kinder. Habe ich umgeschrieben, Kinderlieder und Spielen, Pieces. Und wir haben verbracht sehr gut, wenn mein Mann ist nicht gewesen daheim.
Was kickt jetzt dort raus von drin? A Blimele, was singt es auf den Bäumen dort hört? A Fegele, a Blimele bliet, a Fegele singt, a Flatterl fliet, a
Von mir gehabt ein guter Film so.
I mean, that was also one of the ways that she showed affection was by sharing, drawing you and singing songs for you.
Ich hab sehr stark lieb, wie ihr Enkel, Esther, wie so sie singt, die Lieder. Weil ich halt als mein Herz hacke, als sie ist aufgewachsen mit dem. Es ist nicht, dass ich weiß, als sagt, was sie hat sich gelernt von uns ein wenig, von etwas Blätteln, es ist hacke in ihr. Und ich hab sehr halt, wie sie singt das.
My mom put the like glow in the dark stars and on my ceiling when I was a little kid, and she wrote a song which is called Levune, which is about sort of lying in bed and looking at the moon. Levune, die bist da so schön, wenn es scheinst in der finsteren Nacht. Nur sag mir was, die hast nicht genoss, und die Augen haltst die vermacht. Levune, was bist da so freilich, wenn es scheinst in der finsteren Nacht. Bist die am Malketzi, bist die am Melach, sitz ich beim Fenster und tracht.
Und wenn meine Kinder sind geworden groß, habe ich geschrieben für sich allein. Wenn die Kinder sind schon gewesen, I was not needed. Habe ich gesagt, ist die Zeit für sich allein? Und habe gesagt, natürlich, es ist gekommen, natürlich. Es ist schon gewesen dort alle Jahre.
She was so full of things to say. She needed 5 mediums to say them. She was drawing, she was painting, she was writing songs, she was writing plays, she was writing poetry, and all of them were different expressions of different sorts of, stories that she had to tell, stories that she felt needed to be told.
Well, die Mama sie pflegt wegen einer Sachkave. Sie pflegt auch schreiben sehr spät auf der Nacht. Die Muse ist gekommen zu ihr 11, 12, 1 bei Nacht und sie hat geschrieben dämmelt. Und er sagt mal, hat sie gebinnen, sei gezeichnet, ein Bild, sei ein Lied auf ein Seite. Und das wird man sehen in ihren Papieren. Also sie hat eine Sache, auf ein Seite hat sie eine Sache gekannt. Und dazu hat Tagebuch. Sie hat geführt, pushet Notizen, was sie getan hat und was sie getracht.
Things would be born in an unspecified medium, and they would sort of develop in her brain.
Ich halte, dass sie sehr wichtige Persönlichkeiten. So 20. Jahrhundert, ich meine im 20. Jahrhundert, aber ich meine als speziell wichtig ins so 20. Jahrhundert und 21. Jahrhundert. Ich meine, ihre Poesie ist auf einem sehr hohen Niveau. Ich denke, wenn ich bin gewesen in New York, sie dort so eine jährliche Lehnungen von jüdischen Liedern. Ich meine, es sind etliche Dichter in New York, wo sie treffen sich und sie lehnen Lieder. Aber ich habe allemal gehabt, das Gefühl, wenn Beyle ist gegangen auf der Bühne und hat gelehnt. Und ich meine nicht, dass das hat etwas zu tun mit meiner persönlichen Verbindung mit ihr, aber Poshet von sie hat angeheben, lehnen ihre Lieder, habe ich gemeint, wow, es ist nicht kein Sutzgeber, aber es ist sehr hohe Literatur.
Ich war inspiriert, das sagt mal von dem Dreußen. Sie redet mit der Klang, sie fuhrt das Auto. Und also ich werde geboren an Melodie. Und mit der Melodie kamen Wörter.
Ses ist Harz und was gedringt vergeht. Und ich muss heute mit sich ständig Frühling und halt in Hand die ganze Ewigkeit.
Das ist einer von ihren bekanntsten und populärsten Lieder, ist Herbstlied. Es ist nicht bei Emmes wegen Herbst, es hat sehr schöne Bilder wegen dem Herbst euch, nur es ist wegen dem Leben. Ja, es ist wegen, wie ein Mensch ist jung und wird älter und die Überlebungen von Leben durch die Imagen von Natur. Und ich meine, das ist es, als sie nutzt solche Sachen wie Imagen von Natur, wegen Bäume und Vögel und so weiter, zu erzählen wegen dem menschlichen Leben und menschlichen Emotionen und Überlebungen.
Ich schreibe Singlieder, letztens Melodies in eine Wörter, Songs, also Lieder zum Singen.
Die Wörter sind sehr persönlich. Ich meine, eine Sache von den Liedern beschreiben sehr klar und sehr verständlich persönliche Überlebungen und Emotionen. wegen dem Lied Sommertag, ja, es ist nicht, dass mein öffentliche politische Lied oder etwas, was beschreibt der tagtäglichen Geschehnis. Es ist künstlich. Avec ist weg, der Sommertag lieber, Blätter vergeltet, liegen auf den Rock. Und die Reihe eines alte Chaläumes, sie gehen zurück zum Sommertag. Rose über Himmel, Bläut über Berglach, Bämer zerzweigte, grün bei der Seite. Und die Reihe eines alte Chaläumes, Rose über Funken, Belichtchen von weit. Wo ist es, wenn du bist stehen geblieben? Herumgeguckt sich, als schier nicht zu spät. Schier nicht verfallen, schier nicht verloren, schier nicht verfällt die Sommertag.
Singlieder ist eine natürliche Herauskunft von meiner Erziehung. Weil meine Mama ist gewesen eine schöne Sängerin und wir haben es auch gesungen. Es ist eine natürliche Qual, Singlieder. Und ich schreibe Singlieder für Kinder, für Größe, traurige, fröhliche. Ja, ich habe etliche herausgegeben.
Und אפשר wohin gar in ihr, am Spochen mit kinderlich vier, verseh das a Palaz a Heim, die zerfallene Churle von Leim. Also habe ich mir getracht, wenn gefahren kein Heim.
Das ist ein großer New Yorker Bahnjeton, sagen wir, ein Token, was die City Law Organisation hat zugeteilt zu den Mammen für ihr Zusteuer zu der Kultur von New York. Ich meine, ein wichtiger Moment in der Mammes Leben ist das Gewinnen die National Heritage Fellowship, was 20 Menschen gewinnen jedes Jahr.
Also habe ich mir getracht, wenn gefahren kein Haife vernach. Hab gesehen auf a Berg alle Stein, an alte Churwe von Leib. Sing ich ein Lied zu der Churwe, Churwe, oh du, wer singt es ein Lied zu einer Churwe, zum Ritten von Räder dazu. Ai, 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 ai.
She gave of herself artistically with little inhibition. I think that you can find her in her poems and her songs. She did a very good job of telling her own story. She was like a strong person. She did not suffer fools. She was uncompromising in her values. Her memory, when it started fading at the end, that was fundamental. For most people, their memory is fundamental, but her memory was a storehouse. It was like a library of and so detailed, and so you could see her reliving them as she told them. And so it was so primary for her experience of the world. She lived in multiple times simultaneously.
Sie hat gehabt ein starker Spur von einer Seite zu lieb ihr, sie ist gewesen wie ein Mensch. Sie ist gewesen sehr freundlich und sehr offen und breitherzig und man hat sich gefühlt sicher man hat sich gefühlt wie, oh, man kann etwas tun mit jüdischen Liedern, man darf es nicht allemal singen. Punkt wie, wir vielleicht singen, wir kennen die neue Sachen mit dem, und es ist nicht wichtig, sie müssen es jüdisch, sie nicht, also man hat lieb ein jüdisches Lied. Kann man singen, kann man zugeben zu der Tradition, kann man tun etwas Neues mit dem. Ich meine, als ihre Sprache ist in der Richtung, also es ist ein bisschen wie geben wir der Leute nicht, das klingt echt schon ein bisschen modern, aber man hört in die Lieder von den Menschen, die sind gewesen auf dem Baustadt, als sie sind geboren, als Sache mehr frei.
Blätter vergeilte liegen auf dem Rohr. In die Rajoines alte Chaloime, sie gehen zurück, Zimmer Rose über Himmel, Blut über Berglach, Beimer zizwag, der Grün bei der Saat. In die Rajoines, süße Chaloimes, goldene Finke, blischen für ne Wand. Wie ist es, wenn die bist stehen geblieben, angekickt dir, als schier nicht zu spät. Schier nicht verloren, schier nicht verloren, schier nicht verfehlt, die Simmertee. Wien ist das Läufen, was ist das Eilen, Kopf über Kopf, wer wem sie trägt. Geht meine Basinde in a stille Fartum, wisse warm das Licht, wenn die Simmertee.
Shkoyach. One of the things about Zoom is you can't hear the applause, but you can see them. Thank you so much. Before we turn it over to our speakers, we have a wonderful opportunity sich zu vertiefen, to really get a little bit deeper in to Beyle's world and her work with a couple of musical performances. So we're going to have two, and the first person I'd like to introduce is somebody who is actually sitting right next to me. You will recognize her from the film. This is Asya Weissman-Schulman, a native of Czernowitz, so shares that in common with Beyle, and also studied Yiddish song with Beyle in many different places. Asya is also the director of the Yiddish Language Institute at the Yiddish Book Center. So I'm just going to gracefully slide over the screen.
Good evening, guten Abend. So I would like to sing a song by Beyle that is about a song, a zemmerl, a song about a song. And there's a refrain in the song that has the words "I die die," which I'm hoping you will join me on, unfortunately with your microphones off, because Zoom has not quite reached the levels that we can all sing together. But in your homes, please sing along. And this is a song about a zemmerl, a song filled with joy, with passion, and with fire. And even if you're not at the rabbi's house and you're not in shul, you still can sing this song quietly at home and it will grow and sprout wings and fly up to the heavens. Azemrel Azab. Aidai, 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 Yaidai, 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 Yadai, Ay, Uniriam baram bam bam, zing ich mir a Zemrel, a Zemrel mit Freud, a Zemrel mit Tam, a Zemrel full flam. Ay, ay, dai, yai, dai, yai, dai, 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 yai, dai, yai, dai, yai, dai, yai, dai, 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 dai. Mit Tracht a so ja hell, mit Tracht a so a hin, und was mer mit Tracht, als weniger der Sinn. A Blättel und a Herz, zittert jeder Schorch. Was ist denn der Mensch, mehr wie Asch und Porch? Ai, ai, dai, ai, dai, ai, dai, 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 ai, dai, ai, dai, ai, dai, 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 dai. It's der Satz in der Nächten schon gewesen, wo sie hat das Eug dämmelt nicht gesehen, ist jai dai 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 und dai dai dam, singen mir a Semmerl mit Feier und mit Flamm, ai jai dai, jai dai, jai dai 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 dai, jai dai, jai dai. Jaida, jada, dai, 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 dai. Und als nicht beim Rabenstisch, und als nicht in Schiel, fort brummt man unter a Semmerl in der Stiel. A Nigendl zerwachst sich, Fliegel leichte fliehen, verliebt man mit Nigendl in die Himmeln hin. Ai, ai, dai, ai, dai, ai, dai, 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 dai. Yai dai, yai dai, yai dai, yada dai 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 dai. Noch einmal. Hey, yai dai, yai dai, yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai, yai dai, yai dai, yada dai dai yai dai dai.
Shenim Dank Asyesh, Goya. And we have even more music to share with you tonight. It's a great pleasure to introduce Aaron Ganshor, who is a pillar of Montreal's Yiddish community, a past president of the Jewish Public Library, and a stalwart member of the Dora Wasserman Yiddish Theater. Aaron, what will you be singing with us tonight?
Well, Shalom Aleichem, alle. It's a privilege to be part of this evening in honor of Beyle Schechter Gottesman. And it's really a privilege to be able to share with you one of my favorite songs, Herbstlied, Autumn Song. And you heard Asya in this wonderful film describe some of what that song entails. I must tell you that my first exposure to this song was when I heard Adrian Cooper, with brilliant accompaniment by Joyce Rosenzweig, do this as the last song on a brilliant album called Dreaming in Yiddish. And it was Love at First Listen, a magnificent song done by Adrian. And so in doing the song for you this evening, I also would like to do this in memory of Adrian, who left us much, much too early. And the song says the following: see, it's autumn, and all that greened has yellowed, and what used to bloom is gone. And I, who thought that spring would last forever and hold in my hand all of eternity. Now, how I wish I could get away from here to a shore where there is still a green spring. But driving rain that gallops on a wild horse whispers secret love in my ear. And it says, why do you need to wait for springtime when autumn offers baskets full of gold? Oh, falling leaves, fleeting days, where will I wander now when thick fog lies in my way? Harpslied. Es ist Herbst und was gegrient, vergelt, verwienet. Es ist Herbst und was geblüht, vergeht. Und ich, was hab gemeint, sie ständig Frühling, bin Hand in Hand die ganze Ewigkeit. Oh, von dicke Blätter, oh, fliehende Kette, oh, wie will ich jetzt wandeln, wenn's liegt gedichter Neppel auf meine Weg. Krakenvögel sagen treurig sei gesund hier. Krächzt in Fenster und es klagt der Wind. Oh, wie wollt ich jetzt da weg von dannen? Zu na Breg, wo der Frühling kriegt. Oh, von dicke Blätter, oh, fliehende Kette, oh, wie will ich jetzt erblongen, wenn's liegt gedichter Neppel auf mein Weg. Flieht a Regen, a Galopp, a wilden Pferdl, räumt mir einer so, der hat mich hol. Zu woje darfst du warten auf den Frühling, wenn's hat der Ossien volle Keuschens Gold. Oh, von dicke Blätter, oh, fliehende Kette, oh, wie will ich jetzt erblongen, wenn's liegt gedichter Neppel auf meine Weg.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. And it's not even July, but you have us thinking ahead to the fall. I'd like to invite Krista and Esther to please unmute yourselves. I'm sure we all have lots of questions after hearing this music, seeing this film, and I certainly have questions for both of you. But before we go into a discussion, I wanted to see if either of you have first impressions after seeing this film. First thoughts that come to your mind after you see this and hear this as well.
I'm amazed it played through. Zoom. Yay! That's my first thought. But that's not what you were asking.
Well, that is the very first thing. Yes, Esther.
I can go. I felt like this was a really appropriate venue for this, to sort of watch it with Beyle's. I know a lot of you are friends with her and a lot of you knew her and met her, and to also have her music, it just felt very much like in the spirit of what it should have been. So I think I appreciate that. It felt very Hamish. So it's good to be here together. Thank you everybody who put this together and who is here now.
I agree. This is as Hamish as Zoom can get.
I loved seeing so many people who knew the songs singing along. That's lovely.
So I have a first question that I'll turn to you, Krista, because it's really specifically about the film itself. I've seen the film before, and seeing it again now, I'm struck by how many details are there in the imagery and what people are saying, and looking at the credits and seeing all of the various sources that you're pulling from. There must have been thousands of hours and thousands of images. How do you curate that? How do you put something together from all of those riches?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the first thing I have to mention again is just the collaboration with the amazing Liz Walber, who did the editing on the film. I mean, I think every time I watch this film, I'm just amazed by how she not only, highlights so much of Beyle's own work, but then also worked with Beyle's art. Sort of one of the things that she did and that she proposed and that she executed so beautifully, I think, is also animating Beyle's artwork and sort of like, building on, taking the multimedia art that already exists in Beyle's work and then taking it into this film, animation realm. And I think, in terms of what was in the film, it's, documentary filmmaking, you sort of start with what you have in front of you and then build off of it. So, the first thing we had was the interview with Beyle, and then, started doing interviews with the other people that you see in the film, and figuring out what images would then support the stories that we started editing together into sort of the script and the rough drafts. So really it starts with the story, and then the images are added, and then there's sort of like a cycle where the images then lead to edits in the story itself.
How long does that process take approximately?
Well, when you're, so we were doing this very part-time for, I would say like 3 years. Yeah, so it's hard to say exactly because, our main work was the collecting and the archival work. And then this was a project that we were doing sort of when we could. And when we had some funding for it through the Kickstarter, then we were able to prioritize it a bit more. But it's not our main work, so it's hard to say exactly.
And could you say a few words about some of the people and the voices we hear in the film? Who are some of these people who we also get to hear some of their own story through them talking about Beyle?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's an area where, there are so many other people's voices. There's so many people who knew Beyle and were inspired by her that we would have loved to interview and include in the film. But, you have to, when you're dealing with limited budget and a timeline of some sorts. But the main people in the film are family members and mentees. So you see Itzik, Beyle's son, and you see Esther, who you all have met now. And then you see also briefly some nieces of Beyle who come in that part about Beyle and the neighborhood. And then the other main voices are Janina Verbs, who is a scholar who actually wrote a book that I can't say the German, but transgenerational Yiddishism, biographies of Beyle Schechter-Gottesman's, and her family. So she is an expert basically in Beyle and obviously and studied with her, but also is has scholarly knowledge of Beyle. So we really wanted to bring in that voice. And then Asya, who you also already met, everyone. So yeah, I think that's everyone.
When I look off screen, I'm looking at Asya. And okay, so that gives us a better sense of who is in the film and how the film has been created. How have audiences reacted to screenings like this one?
Well, this is the first screening like this that I've attended, but we've done the premiere of the film was almost a year ago in Amherst at the Yiddish Book Center, and we have done screenings. There have been screenings all over since then. And yeah, I mean, I've been really pleased that people have enjoyed the film and had mostly positive feedback about it. I think it's really meaningful when people find that it hits them emotionally and that they can connect to the story. I think for me too that it's been really gratifying to see that even people outside of the Yiddish speaking world and the Yiddish cultural world have found connections to it. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to echo, for those of you who might not have seen, Karen has posted in the chat. If any of you have questions, please feel free to post them in the chat or let Karen know to unmute your mic, and you'll be able to speak with us as well. I'm going to shift to Esther for a few minutes. So Esther, if you could unmute your mic, please.
Good, done.
Very good. So Esther, thank you so much for sharing your grandmother, your family, yourself so intimately with us in the film. You speak so eloquently about how Beyle was just bursting with art and creativity. You said at one point, she needed 5 mediums just to get, one thing expressed. I'm wondering if there's one piece of her work that really speaks to you or that encapsulates who she was for you.
Oh my goodness.
I know it started with a tough question. Right?
I don't know. I mean, I think it depends on how I feel like, I lived with Beyle for a lot of for a few years of my childhood, and my dad was in the film as, you know, her primary caregiver, and I spent a lot of time in her house, which is also really shown in a lot of detail. So I feel like there are some like emblematic images of her in that house that really resonate with me. And if you're ever in that house, it was just kind of like brimming with stuff. In terms of her work was so diverse. Like it was like, you know, at 1 year at Kles Camp, we put on a show that she made about latkes, like a play for kids about latkes. And then also she has like lots of, you know, meditations on death. So there's a real variety of things in there. It's hard to sort of pick one because she worked in so many different genres. I guess my favorite song, which is not what you're asking, but I'll answer it that way, is Zilbesterden, which is in fact a meditation on death, and incredibly beautiful. And yeah, that's one of my favorites, I would say. And that she was very thoughtful about her legacy and her life and death because of her experiences. And so that to me, you know, sort of brings a lot of those ideas together artistically.
Was there any? I'm trying to think of a nice way to ask this question. I mean, she worked with so many. She didn't just produce so much work. She worked with so many people. Did she have any collaborators that she particularly enjoyed working with, or that she felt that she could really pass on much of her work and legacy to?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a lot. I mean, you know, we talk about this a little bit, but the house was really, and is still kind of in some ways like a hotel, like a waypoint for anybody who was in, you know, there was always people staying, and she really like gave of herself very tirelessly and fully. And so if you were staying there, you were probably like awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, drinking coffee with her, talking about, so there was a lot of that. I mean, I would say that, you know, sort of my like aunts and uncles in this community through Beyle, like Meishke, Michael Alpert, or Ethel, certainly Ethel Rame, like the folks who were always there, Janet Leuchter, Perl Teitelbaum, like the extended family that was always there. And then also Yanina. I mean, Yanina is in this film, and Yanina is really funny that she knows a lot more about my puppy than I do, and she's really like a sibling in her to me, and also a family member. So I'm glad that everyone got to meet her through this also.
I feel like we have a really good sense of the world you grew up in, and I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit about the role that Yiddish plays in your life now.
Sure. Well, I'm an educator, and I don't think that is, I think that's part of, you know, I think part of the thing with Yiddish is that if you speak it, you teach it. And a lot of people teach it while they are learning it. And that is, you know, so I started teaching Yiddish to kids when I was in college as a weekend job. And I still do. I'm a Yiddish teacher at the Arbeiting by me here. And I think that being around a community in the way that Kles Canada, Kles Camp, like all of this sort of multi-generational family, I think that supported me to being a teacher, and that I still, Yiddish is a huge part of my life in lots and lots of ways. My closest family members and of choice are all, you know, klezmer musicians, and yeah, so Yiddish is really important to me. It's not something that I do professionally, and you know, a lot of my family does, but it is definitely, you know, a passion, and is something important to me. But I teach in a public school. I'm a third grade teacher, so yeah.
Wonderful. Well, as a member of that community, I can certainly say that you know, you say you're not a professional Yiddishist, but it's certainly, you spend a lot of time, as much time in that world as the professional Yiddishists do. So I think it counts.
Great.
Okay, so before we turn it over to the Oilam, I have a question that I think both of you, I want to hear what both you and Krista, how you would answer this. In preparation for this, I'm going to show this book that I think this was the first place where I actually encountered Beyle's poetry. It's this bilingual edition that's sort of strangely called Lieder in English, poems. And I was reading it and thinking about this event, and then watching this film again. It's striking how much Beyle she's at home both in nature and in the city. She writes for adults and for children with equal comfort. She's writing for the page and to be sung. Where is she most at home? You know, in all this, her life, you know, she's traveling throughout her life. Where do you find, or where did Beyle find herself in all of these very, very different places and venues?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think part of what you're pointing to is like the experience of diaspora, right? And I think that, like you sort of, it's the everywhere and nowhere kind of thing. I mean, I think it's about people, and that I think is what I learned from Beyle, and what I've learned from this whole community is that it's really not geographic. It's really your people are together, whether it be through Zoom or in a room singing or whatever that is. So I think that was paramount. And but yeah, I mean, I think where it was most comfortable around a table singing with her community, to me.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can add to that, because I don't have, you know, I really got to know her after the fact through working on this project. So yeah, I guess artistically, as one way to answer your question, I feel like, you know, it's really interesting to see the different topics that are just sort of worked through in the different media. So I think it's interesting to see, you know, to like, what is it, can you compare a poem to a painting, and what happens when you know, pick up on themes across different media. So
another question to both of you, and I feel like you're coming from such different places that you probably answer this very differently. Do you have any questions that you wished you had asked Beyle that you didn't have the opportunity to? We'll start with Krista, since you're on the screen. Sure.
I think that, you know, that's something that I always have questions after an interview's over that I wish I'd asked. Yeah, I think I wish I had known her work better and been able to really talk to her about, in more depth, about not just writing, but you know, the visual art that she did, because I didn't know about that when I met her. So I think that would be the area that I just would love to hear about, and kind of the question that I was talking about. What is it? When was she drawn to work in different media, and like why? You know, I don't know if an artist can really answer that question, but I would have loved to hear her musings on that.
I feel like my answer is like a real granddaughter answer. But I don't necessarily wish that I had asked different questions. I wish that I had listened better I feel, you know, when you're a teenager or when you're a kid, you know, there was there are moments that I can think back on when I sort of knew the answer before I asked the question, or I was not as sort of empathetic to her life experience, or, you know, just the way that teenagers are judgmental, or the way that they come into a conversation with preconceived ideas. And I wish that I had done that less. I mean, you know, we lived together, and even when we didn't, we spent a lot of time together, and I was who I was. Was a very strident teenager, but I wish that as a teenager and a child, I had just done a better job of learning from her and listening. And she really had, you know, she was incredibly expressive, and she had a lot to say and share. And I just, I definitely, I don't know if regret is the word, but I definitely think back on some of the times when we would, like, you know, I would try to have a political conversation. I would try to make something, you know, just, you know, and I don't know that I always listened the way that I could have.
Thank you both. If anybody has any questions in the audience, I'm happy to, well, I can't pass you the mic, but you can, so we have a question here from Harvey Nabolsky, and he asks, how much discussion of the Shoah, or being so far from the world of Czernowitz in which she grew up, was there at Breinbrichevke? Was it there always somewhere? Was it there always somewhere, or not much, or greater as time went on? Or was that experience more or less kept behind closed doors? Or did she always appear to be a much more forward-looking person? There's a lot to unpack in that, in that question.
I can take a crack at it, Krista. But I mean, I think she very much thought a lot about the past, and about the Holocaust was definitely something that, you know, she really lived in. And I think that was the thing with Beyle, is that she, like, really re-experienced memories. They weren't passive, they were very active. And so she would sit there and you would have a conversation with her about friends that had died, and she would think about it a lot. But she was also, I mean, you know, we're creative, and there's something when you create that's very forward looking, right? It's very, you want to share it. There's something very active about that. So I wouldn't say that she, I mean, it was there for anybody who came in that moment and, you know, lived in a community like that. It was there, but you know, and it was painful, but it wasn't the sum total of her experience or her story.
Thank you. We have another question here from Karen. She asks, Karen asks, was Beyle connected to any of the Yiddishist camps?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Boybrick forever. Yeah, yeah. She and my dad went to Boybrick, and they all went to Boybrick as like a family. And my Beyle did something there, but I don't remember what it was. And then other people in our family went to Hemshech, but we were Boybrick people.
Can you just briefly explain what was Boybrick versus Hemshech?
I don't know that I can explain the intricacies. I'm sure other people here are much better positioned to do that than I. But they were Yiddish summer camps that were. So I think Hemshech was more sort of left leaning than Boybrick. Does anybody know? Is that right?
Yeah, we did actually like a feature on the Yiddish summer camps on the Yiddish Book Center website. So maybe I'll put it in the chat if anyone wants to learn more about it. Yeah, from my understanding, Hemshech was connected to the Bund and created mostly by Holocaust survivors, and Boybrick came out of the Sholem Aleichem network educational system and was sort of like intentionally apolitical as opposed to some of the other Yiddishist camps that were more aligned with specific political movements.
Thank you, and please do put that in the chat, Krista. Elia, you have a question, I see.
I do for Krista, but also Beyle was a Yiddishist kids camp as well as a summer retreat for adults. And Hemshech was just a children's camp. So Krista, you've been all over the Yiddish world and met all kinds of Yiddish personalities. Doing this film, was there any alteration in how you saw the world of Yiddish? Did it change any of your perspectives on the world of Yiddish?
Well, I think, yes, I think every interview I do actually add something. But more specifically, I'm trying to think about the process of working on the film specifically. I think I learned a lot more about the Yiddish education system in New York specifically. You know, it made me think about the question of sort of like, you know, Yiddish visual art and what that means. Is there such a thing as like Yiddish visual art and what that means? And I think it sort of really refined the idea of the Yiddish song tradition and how, you know, singing a cappella and singing in group, and really that it sort of opened up that whole world to me. So I would say that would be sort of the biggest thing that it opened up, sort of refining like different kinds of you know, Yiddish song and really like the Yiddish folk song tradition.
You did a fantastic job. You also showed me a lovely picture of my Shalom Aleichem shul. I'm going to have to get from you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? You know, it's striking as we're talking about Hemshach and Boiberik and the Shalom Aleichem Shulen and all of these different pieces of the Yiddish world that oftentimes were, you know, sometimes had friendly relations and sometimes had sort of friendly disagreements, shall we say. And when I think about Beyle and her position in the Yiddish world, it seems to me that she was, you know, somehow deeply involved in all of that, but also sort of above it. Would Krista and Esther, would you agree with that assessment, or is that me sort of looking through rose-colored retrospective glasses?
Do you want to go, Krista?
No, I'll let you take that one.
I mean, I don't know that she was above it. I think that anybody who met her would say that she was a real tough cookie. I mean, she, you know, she really said what she felt, and she would very famously go up to people after they were done with concerts and be like, I want to name all of the things that you just messed up on. She was really, and an insistence that the Yiddish be good and that the Yiddish be right, and that, you know, they sing the song in Yiddish, don't, you know, we had, like, if I remember once there, I don't remember who it was, but there was somebody sang a translation of an English children's song, and she went up to them at the concert venue and was like, you know, we have Yiddish children's songs. Like, she really did not suffer fools, and she really, so I don't know if that, I mean, I think that there was like a real, that was sort of democratically given, like, you know, and I think that she felt anywhere, my dad is the same way, anywhere that Yiddish is spoken, those are our friends. It doesn't matter how good the Yiddish is. I mean, as long as people are trying, and as long as people are interested in improving their Yiddish and connecting to their, you know, to their culture, and anything that's good for Yiddish is good for us. And that, I think that was very much her philosophy too. So yeah.
Krista, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think I wouldn't know that as much, having not really seen it. Like what I heard about her house as really being open to was that it was really open to anyone who was interested in studying with her, and it didn't matter if you, as long as you were willing to do the work of looking up the word in the dictionary and putting the time in, that I love what Janina says in the film about how Beyle encouraged people and inspired them to work with Yiddish material. And I didn't get to know that, but I think that really, sends the message that as long as you showed up for it and were putting in the work, that that she was there for that and very generous.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other final thoughts or questions? We're just about up for time, in fact. So I think I'm actually just I'll take the last word to say thank you. A sheinem dank, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much to Esther, to Krista, to the Yiddish Book Center, Kles Canada, and especially to the Jewish Public Library. Also our musical guests Asya and Aaron. And thank you all so much to you for coming out tonight and being with us. A sheinem herzlichen Dank.
From the library, I just want to thank Sebastian so much for being our moderator tonight. And thank you all for joining us. We hope that you'd come to our next events. Check us out online on our Facebook page, on YouTube, or on the library's website. And a guten Abend. Good night, everybody.